Now we're going to move on to part two, which is all about adding oils to your hair. So the first thing we'll do is have a look at the structure of oils and butters, and you will learn that they all have the same basic structure. We will then explore what oils do to your hair, because oils can affect your hair in different ways. And lastly, we will look into when in your regimen you can use oils in your hair. There are different uses of oils in your hair care, of course, so we will explore those. No two plant oil extracts are exactly the same because the plants vary and so do extraction methods. In addition, the conditions that plants are grown in and the farming methods will also affect the composition of plant oils. But once extracted, all oils, with the exception of jojoba oil, which is technically a wax, have the same structure. So a triglyceride is another word for a vegetable oil or an oil. And if we break that word down, we get tri, which means three, and glyceride, which comes from glycerol. A triglyceride, or an oil, is basically a molecule, so this would be the molecule comprised of 3 fatty acids and 1 glycerol. Here is a more detailed diagram showing the glycerol backbone. So these zigzags like this, they just mean that there's a lot of carbons and hydrogens, and this means that it's a kind of fatty or oily chain. If you see a structure like this, it's just think fatty. So we have the 3 fatty acids and we have the glycerol. And this part here, these fatty acids, they're hydrophobic, so they do not mix with water. This structure is a triglyceride. So now that we know that oils all have the same basic structure, what accounts for their dramatically different properties? Why are some oils liquid, for example, castor oil, and others solid, for example, cocoa butter, at the same temperature? Well, the answer lies in the fatty acids. Their structure leads to differences in the properties of the oil. By the way, to make this clear, oils and butters are the same. They are both made up of triglycerides. The only difference is that butters have a higher melting point than oils. So, how exactly can fatty acids vary? I want you to look at this structure again and think about how the fatty acid portion of a triglyceride might be different in different oils. Just guess, even if you don't know anything about this, just guess. How might this structure be different? Okay, so one way in which fatty acids can vary is in their chain length. The chains can be very short or they can be very long. And shorter chains make the triglycerides smaller. Smaller triglycerides penetrate more easily into your hair. So that's something to bear in mind for your hair regimen. Also, the shorter the chain, the higher the melting point. So butters tend to have shorter chains than oils. Another way that they can differ is in their saturation. The more saturated the triglyceride, the less bulky it is, and the more likely it is to penetrate. And since saturated fatty acids fit together more easily, they also have a higher melting point. Okay, I just threw around the word saturation, like just assuming that you know what it means, but I'm going to backtrack and not assume that. What does saturation mean? Basically, we have this is a carbon, and it can form 4 bonds. In this molecule, we can see that carbon has only single bonds. So it just has 1 bond here, 1 bond here, 1 bond here, and 1 bond here. The H's are hydrogens, the C's are carbons. So single bond, single bond, single bond, single bond. In this way, carbon is said to be saturated because everywhere that it can, it is bound to another hydrogen, right? So we have a hydrogen here, here, and here. This means that it can't bind to any more hydrogens. However, if we compare it to this molecule, you can see that there's what's called a double bond here, which means technically you could put another hydrogen here and another hydrogen here. So the presence of double bonds means that this is not saturated and this is saturated. So this is also, by the way, the same as the zigzags that we saw earlier. So the same as this, right? These zigzags, these are carbons and hydrogens, just to be clear there. You can't see it from this diagram, but wherever we have double bonds, the main point that you need to take away from this is that there are now kinks in the fatty acid chain. And so here you can see that there's a kink here and there's a kink here. That just means that there are double bonds. So there's a double bond here and a double bond here. That makes the triglyceride bulkier. To summarize, shorter fatty acids penetrate into your hair more easily because they are smaller. And wherever there is unsaturation, aka double bonds, this results in kinks in the fatty acid chain. So here we can see a saturated fatty acid chain that is straight. Then we have an unsaturated fatty acid chain with just one double bond. So it has one kink. And then we have a polyunsaturated fatty acid chain, which has multiple kinks in it. So this is actually called a monounsaturated fatty acid, mono meaning one, and unsaturated meaning that there is a double bond here. And this is poly coming from many, and unsaturated, like many double bonds here. So many kinks. It is important to note that polyunsaturated fatty acids do not penetrate into your hair because they are too bulky. Okay, so wherever we have lots of these double bonds, it creates kinks. The kinks make the oil really big, then the big oil cannot slip underneath the cuticles and into your hair. So far, we've looked at a lot, but the main takeaway so far is just that oils and butters have the same basic structure, and differences in the fatty acid chain account for differences in how oils and butters affect your hair. But what do oils do to your hair, and how can you harness this for your healthy hair journey? Well, oils that penetrate can replenish the cement that we looked at between your cells and improve your hair's elasticity and strength. So we talked about the fact that along with the sun, we've got repeated shampooing and other factors that lead to the loss of this oil over time. And penetrative oils especially can replenish the cement here. And so we can see we've got these little triglycerides, and we've put them, or we can see that they are here in between these hexagonal bricks, which represent the cells that make up your hair. And so nicely, we can see that these oils are able to penetrate into your hair. This is just a representation of that process. Something else to note is that oils that can penetrate reduce your hair's swelling in water, making your hair less vulnerable when it is wet. So this is a dry hair fiber, and then when you wet it, it swells, the cuticles lift a bit, and this can make your hair more susceptible to breakage and then weaker over time, over many cycles. But if you put oil in your hair before you wash it, especially a penetrative oil, which can go into your hair's cortex, then your hair is going to swell less when you wet it and will therefore be less susceptible to breakage while wet. And so it will not weather as quickly as if you just wet oil-free hair. Importantly, penetration of an oil increases with time and is typically also enhanced by temperature. So leaving oil in dry hair for 12 hours would be a safe bet in order to get as much penetration as possible. So over time, as the oil sits in your hair for longer and longer, the penetration increases, but after a certain point, you're not going to get any more penetration, and then it's time to just wash your hair. If you warm up an oil in a water bath, so you take the oil, you put it in a bowl that contains warm water, then that will speed up the penetration of the oil. So you would just take a bottle of that oil and leave that bottle sitting in some warm water for a few minutes to warm it up before applying it to your hair. Something else that oils can do is enhance the potency of your conditioners. So imagine you've got a conditioner and it works okay, but it's not working so well. Well, an oil could potentially help you with this. The red pluses here represent the positively charged parts of your conditioner. So basically, after you shampoo your hair, it has a negative charge, and the conditioner is positively charged, so it will come in and neutralize. The positively charged parts of your conditioner are especially attracted to the damaged parts of your hair. But sometimes you might use a conditioner and notice that it doesn't really make your hair feel so soft. Adding an oil to a conditioner can actually enhance its ability to bind to your hair. So you can either add the oil to your hair's surface and then put the conditioner on top and then rinse, or you can add the oil directly to the conditioner. This can make the conditioner more effective. Oils can also fill in gaps in the surface of your hair, minimizing further damage. So you can get damage to your hair, for example, from combing it, from brushing it, from rough handling it, from braiding, from the wind, etc. And oils can help not undo that damage, but refill those gaps so that the rest of your hair doesn't become more vulnerable because of that previous damage. Unfortunately, your hair remembers everything you do to it, so you can't really undo the damage, but you can you can kind of patch up the damage until it's time to trim that hair away. When oils are saturated, are they branched or unbranched? They are unbranched. So this means that they can slide along each other more easily. And an oil with lots of very long chain saturated fatty acids can actually give your hair more shine than one with lots of kinks. So we have an oil with lots of long chain saturated fatty acids, which can nicely reflect light from the surface of your hair and make your hair look shinier, especially if it's damaged. Damaged hair surfaces tend to look less shiny. So you could put one of these oils on the surface of your hair and improve the shine. But note that clean, healthy hair is the shiniest. And it's actually shinier than oily hair. But if you don't want your hair to be naked, then using oils with saturated long chain fatty acids would be your best bet. And it's also important to have more homogeneity. So you don't want lots of fatty acids of different lengths. You want them to all be around the same length. Oils with these longer chain fatty acids can also make your damp hair easier to comb. So in this diagram, you can see hair represented in brown, then water represented in blue, and oil shown in gray. If you add water to your textured hair, that makes it more pliable. That said, as we've already seen, it also lifts your hair's cuticles and makes your hair a little bit rougher and a little bit more vulnerable. If you add an oil on top of damp hair, it can allow you to benefit from having softened hair because there's water in it while minimizing damage to your strands. And since these oils do not penetrate and instead form a film on the surface of your hair, they glide past one another easily and they give your hair really good slip. And this can protect your hair. Your hair will also not have a tacky feeling with these longer saturated fatty acids. So these oils are great for detangling too. Oils with lots of branching can create a barrier on your hair that slows down moisture loss. With kinky hair, you might have heard before, it's good to keep your hair moisturized. Having more moisture in your hair actually helps it to break less. So that's why these types of oils can be helpful. However, because of all the kinks, so you have the oils that are like this, they reflect light in multiple directions, which means that your hair will not be as shiny with these oils on the surface. Oops. But they can slow down the loss of water. They can also trap lint and dust on your hair surface, so something to bear in mind that as well. And you can use any oil or butter for this, but to maximize moisture retention, you can look towards those with the high polyunsaturated fatty acid content. Oils can also prevent or reduce the formation of split ends. Split ends starts in the cuticle of your hair. So that was the outermost layer of your hair. By filling in gaps in the cuticle, oils can prevent the formation of split ends during combing and handling. And since your ends are the oldest and most fragile part of your hair, you can also choose to exclusively use oils at the very ends of your hair. You don't have to use them all throughout. In my personal experience, wetting my hair and leaving it to dry can leave it to form knots. And I believe this has two main causes. One is that when your hair is wet, the cuticles lift, and this allows your hairs to catch on each other and form little snags and knots. And the other is that when your hair is wet, your hair will also shrink and coil round itself and form knots in that way. Adding an oil that is correspondingly heavy. So if your hair is thick, adding a thick oil to your hair can help prevent knots in especially tangle prone hair. And of course, if your hair is not so thick, you might want to opt for a not so heavy oil. Butters can make some people's hair harder to comb. They do not spread as easily along your hair, and so they can actually increase friction. And heavy oils can also sometimes do this, so it's something to be mindful of. Unlike oils, butters can make your hair harder to comb. However, in my experience, I actually find this increased friction really helpful. So after I have washed my hair and I am looking to stretch it, sometimes I'll use a whipped butter to squeeze the excess water out of my hair. So I'll just squeeze it through. The water comes out so easily because the butter is like thick and it's heavy, and it helps me elongate and also detangle my hair. So contrary to what a study has found about butters increasing the difficulty of detangling, they actually help my hair because they make my hair heavier. So they stop it from, when it is wet, like shrinking up still, they kind of weigh it down. And that weight helps me detangle my hair personally. Something to bear in mind. My observation is that butters actually provide a better stretch than oils. And I imagine that this is because they add weight to your hair and are harder to move along your hair, which means that you squeeze out more moisture when you apply them and you therefore get less shrinkage. And you probably have more of the butter in your hair. And also because butters are heavier, so they give your hair some weight as well. So you can see that my hair is really elongated here, and this is like right after I've washed it. It's really stretched still. It's not completely shrunken. In my experience as well, butters help to prevent matting in my protective styles. So here you can see me sporting my Lilian Okibe temporary locks. So these are made just by loosely plaiting your hair. And I wore these for like 5 or 6 weeks, but my hair did not lock. And what stopped that from happening was from using butters. So I used a thick butter when installing these and also after washing them. And I believe that that really stopped my hair from matting. And it's probably because of the heaviness of the butter and the saturated fatty acid content. So I've shared a lot, but there are a few different phases of your regimen when you may want to use an oil or a butter in your hair. So you might want to use them pre-wash to protect your hair from water damage, or maybe you want to use them pre-wash just for detangling because your hair is difficult to detangle, or to just make your hair easier to handle. Maybe you just want to put your hair into sections and wash your hair in those sections. You may want to use an oil or butter in your hair after you wash to enhance your conditioner to make your hair feel even softer than it does after you use your conditioner. You may want to use it after you rinse out your conditioner to reduce the stripped feeling. So some people like to do what is called oil rinsing. You can use it then. You may want to use an oil in your hair to moisturize your hair. So when you add some water and some leave-in to your hair, you may want to also add an oil to lengthen how long your hair feels moisturized or to prevent matting in your hair. You may want to use oils for shine or to reduce flyaways, to make your hair stretch more, or for detangling. And so that would be for styling. So these are the main stages of your regimen when you could consider using an oil or a butter. Oils and butters can soften and smoothen your hair, improve the ease of combing, and add shine and protect it. The ones that you use will depend upon your hair's needs. So now we are going to have some quiz questions. So you can do the quiz questions and come back and I will go through the answers.